Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now. But can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 86. Today the Amateur Traveler goes to the Everglades.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh no, 15-hour flight, oh, I don't think I'll ever be coming home. You know I love it. I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. One news story I didn't mention for you last week, but you probably heard about already, is the Sea Diamond, which is a cruise ship that was sailing in the Aegean, sunk, which is fairly rare for cruise vessels. It hasn't happened in a decade. Reading the story from an article on fromers.com, which I'll put a link to. Last week, the 1,537-passenger Sea Diamond, a 21-year-old vessel operated by the Cyprus Louise Cruise Lines, became the first large cruise ship in nearly a decade to sink while carrying passengers. The ship went down near the Greek island of Santorini in the early morning hours of April 16th after striking an underwater volcanic reef which tore a hole in the starboard side. All but two passengers and all crew were safely evacuated from the vehicle. Two French passengers, a 45-year-old man and a 16-year-old daughter, are still unaccounted for. In better news, Ryanair, which is one of Europe's low-cost carriers, may be one of the first airlines to take advantage of the Open Skies Treaty. It is planning on offering transatlantic flights within the next 3 to 4 years, with a fleet of 30 to 40 long-haul aircraft. So it is a low-cost carrier, and that could definitely affect other rates that are available. If you're interested in podcasting or just hearing more about it, you might check out the Podcast Hotel. Podcast Hotel 3 will be in San Francisco next weekend, April 20th or 21st. I'm planning on being there, at least on the 21st. Not sure if I can get the day off on the 20th, which is Friday. One of the keynote speakers will be Andrew Barron from Rocket Boom, the well-known video podcast. If you're going to be in town for that, by all means, let me know. I'd like to welcome to the show Heidi, who's come to talk to us today about the Everglades. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's good to be here.
You've been a listener to the show, so you know how the game is played here. Can you tell us why you went to the Everglades?
Sure. I took a class there. It was called Ecology of Unique Environments, and so we spent a week camping in the Everglades, which was just fantastic.
Now, you say the Everglades, and I think swamp, so I'm sure I have a very one-dimensional picture of what you're in there, and camping in swamp doesn't sound very fun. So first of all, why don't you tell me how much I'm missing out in terms of my understanding of what the Everglades, how big is the Everglades, what does it entail?
Okay. There was a lot of swamp there. But anyway, the Everglades it's the runoff now from Lake Okeechobee running south to the Taylor Slough, which is in Florida Bay, and the Shark River, which funnels into the Gulf of Mexico. And at one point in time, pre-industrialization, it ran all the way down from Lake Okeechobee, actually from Orlando, basically, all the way south.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
that was, yeah. So it was a 50-mile wide river of grass that was 6 inches deep, just running very slowly down all of South Florida. So now it's obviously been dammed up, and there are canals, and there are sugar plantations, and there's all sorts of stuff like that. But you can see from the air. It's really cool. You can just see where it starts or where we have left off, however you want to look at it. From the Miami airport, you just see a nice square that cuts it off, and from there on is pretty much just swamp going south.
So when you camp there, are you camping outside of the swampland, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's there is some dry land. There's actually several different ecosystems in there. There's wet prairie, there's dry prairie, there are cypress domes, and then there's full-on swamp that's like 6 feet of water, or less than that, but 3 feet of water that you can take a tour and wade through, which was really interesting.
You say cypress domes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means. I don't understand cypress.
All right. Unless you've been through that area, you probably would have never seen them. But they are growing essentially in the wet prairie. You can see them from the road, driving along the road. You just see the level of the trees starts to go up, and it literally forms a dome and comes down on the other side. They're fairly small stretches, but usually in the center of the dome is an alligator hole, and that's where the trees have the deepest roots. They're the biggest, tallest trees in the center. They have the deepest roots. And then it just kind of, as you come back out of the dome, the water level decreases, and you're walking on peat, I guess it is, or periphyton. It's like a spongy algal material that you walk through, and there's some water there. But as you get closer to the center of the dome, the water level gets deeper and deeper.
And so what led you to take this class in the Everglades?
I was taking the environmental science program at the University of Buffalo, where the class is offered. And it wasn't a mandatory class, but it was one of the options. And when I realized that, I thought, I need to do this because I'd like to see the Everglades before they're completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, and from the inside is just a fantastic way to see it. You know, we had tour guides all the way, really, really knowledgeable people telling us what we were seeing. And so we appreciated it a little bit more, I think.
And what were some of the highlights of the trip?
The highlights, I think, was the swamp tour, where we're probably in up to 4 feet of water wading through the swamp. That was a highlight, although I was very nervous about it coming up to it. But once we got in there, it was phenomenal.
I would be nervous too, and that's a safe thing to do.
It is. It's very much, you can do it with guided ranger tours, which we did both times I've been there. I had to go back. And now after looking through all my notes again, I think it's time to go back again. But yeah, it is safe. I would not recommend that anybody just go off on their own and pick a spot, but especially with a guide, it is very safe, especially with a number of people. We saw no animals in the swamp itself. Any animals I saw were outside of the swamp. So, trust me, I was looking.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Other highlights?
Seeing the night sky down there with no light pollution anywhere, because you're probably at our campground, which is at the Flamingo campground, which is still probably an hour and a half from Miami, a little bit west and mostly south. There was no light pollution whatsoever, so the night sky was phenomenal. I've never seen a night sky like that, so that was impressive.
Any big surprises?
The big surprise, well, it depends on what time of year you would go there, because we're getting into now the wet season, and you don't want to be in the swamp in the wet season. The dry season, winter, is the time to go. The mosquitoes, even at the time we checked in, there was a little sign at the ranger booth that said, it gave the mosquito level. And it was tolerable when we checked in, but the bottom of the little scale was pure bedlam. And we kind of figured that's summer, and that's not the time to go.
Now, you say that the dry season and the wet season, but you're in a swamp.
That's true, but this is another part of the Everglades that we have essentially destroyed with industrialization, whatever you want to call it. The water flow levels, the whole system is used to a system of flooding.
Okay.
And then gradually, I guess, unflooding. But we have now, managed it with the levees and the dikes and everything else, so that now that whole system is gone. There really isn't the flooding system that there used to be. And a lot of the wildlife is dependent on it. I think the snail kites or the wood storks, they build their nests above the water line, pending the floods, but the floods are essential for their ideal ecosystem, but it doesn't happen anymore. And so there are a lot of animals in danger because of we've disrupted the natural rhythm.
And so what kind of wildlife are you seeing? I assume that a lot of the point of going to the Everglades is to see the wildlife.
Yes, absolutely. And the bird wildlife was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you, I just made a list today of all my sightings. There had to be close to, I don't know, 80 or 90 different bird species that we saw
Oh
just
my.
within a week.
Hmm.
And this is with obviously someone really knowledgeable. You know, I wouldn't know if it was this swallow versus that swallow, but we saw a whole array of birds. Every egret, I think, that exists. We saw every heron that exists: the great blue, the little blue, tricolor, greenback. We saw so many different birds. A lot of the white birds that, because of their diet of shrimp, they turn pink. The spoonbill and the ibises. We saw all of those. Just amazing birds. We saw white pelicans, which I had never seen before. They're the second biggest bird in the U.S. They have a 110-inch wingspan.
Oh
So
my.
they are massive birds. And they winter down there. They actually spend the rest of their time up in the frozen north, which hopefully isn't always frozen. But so, yeah, they're amazing birds. And I had never seen them before. I never heard of a white pelican. So they were a favorite of mine.
And you also mentioned in the email when we first started talking about doing this show that it's the only place in the world where you can find both alligators and crocodiles. Do I understand that correctly?
You know, that I guess I would not swear to, but it's the only place in the world you can find the American crocodile.
Well, there you go.
That I'm pretty sure of. And they were, up until recently, they were endangered. And as of when I took the class a few years ago, there were allegedly only 400 or 500 left. Though I have since heard that they're talking about delisting them, so I'm not really sure what that means. But
I think that's because now they're leading tourists through the swamp as a way of increasing the alligator population.
So they're better fed. That's right. That's right. But until I took the class, I had no idea there was an American crocodile. I thought it was just alligators. But there is. And we saw some up close.
And the first question, of course, that comes to mind is why. But how big? First of all, how big is an American crocodile?
They're full grown. They're good size. They're probably maybe a little bigger than an alligator. There's one that hangs out by the boat ramp at the Flamingo area, which is the main area within the park where there are concessions. You can rent boats. There are docks you can fish. So in that area, there's one that hangs out right by the ramp on the far side. And, I don't know, that thing's got to be 8-10 feet long. It's very large, very slow, very lazy from what I've seen, but it's a big animal. And you can pretty much walk. I wouldn't walk right up to it, but we were on a bridge overlooking it, and we were, 10 feet away from it. It's pretty cool.
My understanding from having seen them in captivity is that they're very slow right up until the moment they strike those. So that would be the thing I'm a little worried about there.
Well, that could be true. It's also, they're maybe not quite dormant in the winter, but they're not as active. They don't eat as much, or possibly not at all, because they thermoregulate and they're dependent on the sun. So they're much slower, but I wasn't really testing that. No desire to find that out.
I just was reminded of the old joke, what do you find between an alligator's teeth? Slow-running tourists. But
or swamp tourists, either are.
That's right.
No, we didn't see any. That was my big fear, but we didn't see any out in the swamps, which was nice.
And you went out in the swamp, besides just walking out there, did you take boats, or what else is involved in this trip?
We did canoe, not in the swamp, but down the river from the Flamingo Marina. So we did some canoeing from there, and we looked for manatees. Manatees apparently, allegedly frequent the area, but we didn't see any. That was on my list because I've never seen one, so I thought that'd be cool. But so we did canoeing, and from there we saw more crocodiles. We saw a little baby crocodile out on the branch in the water. It's really neat.
And I'm assuming you're with a guide who can tell you about the animals that you're looking at. Did you pick up any knowledge that you didn't have before you went?
Oh, a lot. That was the whole point of the class. So yeah, our prof, there were actually a couple of profs who were with us, and they've been doing this the one prof has been doing it for, I don't know, probably 15 years, going to Florida with groups 2-3 times a year. So he's extremely knowledgeable. So yeah, we learned a lot about a lot of things that we didn't know much about before.
And can you give us a sample?
Oh, we learned all about the mangrove trees. The mangrove swamps are essential nursery areas for shrimp and a lot of the smaller critters, animals, whatever. Mm-hmm. We learned about a lot of the seaside plants that you see. They're exposed to constant salt from the sea. And they actually have like buttonwood and buttonbush and sea grape and all the mangroves. They have different methods of excreting salt because obviously, like us, they can't intake that much salt. and survive. And so some of them have little glands on the leaves that they excrete salt through. Some have various methods of excreting salt, which was really interesting because I didn't know anything about it. And being a Yankee, I'm not that familiar with the Florida environment in general. So it was all really interesting.
And so this is a saltwater swamp?
It's brackish. The
It's
water
brackish.
flow, it's
Oh,
both.
okay.
So the water flowing south is fresh water.
Sure.
But then the water coming in from Florida Bay is salt water. So parts of it are brackish, parts of it are clear water. The swamp that we actually walked through was clear water. It was fresh water. Inside the swamp that we were walking through, we were walking probably 3 feet of water, but we weren't sure what the depth would be. And inside there, you saw all the epiphytic plants. Epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants.
Okay.
But they're not parasitic. They're just it's not mutual. They just grow there.
So it's not even a
host plant
symbiotic
doesn't
relationship, but it's not harmful. Huh.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. Although the host doesn't really gain from it, but it's only harmful when there are too many of them and they actually topple the host plant. But they survive on the air and the water. So that's where we saw the orchids in the swamp.
Interesting.
So if anybody's seen the movie The Orchid Thief, in fact, that was filmed in the Fakahatchee Swamp, and people do that. They go in and they steal these orchids. They're worth a lot of money on the orchid black market. But they're beautiful, and they only bloom in certain places, only under certain conditions, and you have to be in the middle of the swamp looking for them to even see them, which is just amazing.
And do they bloom that time of year? You were there in December.
Many of them did. Many of them did. And the ranger we went through with is a state park ranger, and he lives. Maybe he doesn't technically live in the swamp, but he's in there every day. He has notes on, you could come across a ghost orchid, and he would say, oh, there's this one here, and pull out his little notebook, like, oh, this bloomed last year, this bloomed, he has a whole history of the plant in his mind and in his little notebook, which just amazed me that somebody could be that knowledgeable.
Interesting.
But it was very interesting. And when we went the second time, we were in a different section of the swamp, I believe. And most of what we saw was an invasive plant from Vietnam that had displaced all of the local epiphytes, which is kind of sad.
What do you wish you'd known before you went the first time?
I think I wish I'd been more comfortable with the whole swamp thing, because that really did throw me off for a little while, because it's very unnerving. You think of Florida, South Florida in particular, you think snakes and alligators, and once I knew crocodiles. So I wish that I'd been a little better prepared for that and less worried about it. Just assume that they did know what they were doing, and they probably usually bring everybody back, but because I spent a little too much time worrying about it. But it was just phenomenal. I really had no idea of just the world that existed there. This is the only subtropical climate in the U.S., and it is spectacular.
Anything that you mentioned not being able to see manatees, anything else that didn't live up to the expectations? Either the guidebooks or the expectations you went with?
No, not really. It was all, I knew it was just going to be all brand new to me, so it was all interesting. But it was interesting that I think we saw all of 3 different mammals. It's just such a different world. It's a water world, so there are hundreds of different birds and some reptiles, though we didn't see too many. But I saw a marsh rabbit, and this was interesting. Both the rabbit and the deer there, they're marsh rabbit and marsh deer, and they're semi-aquatic because they have to be. That's what their environment is. So I don't think they actually live in the water, but they have to be able to swim and make their way through it. And so that was interesting.
Yeah, that's a little different from my picture of rabbit and deer. Okay.
Exactly. And I didn't see one swimming, but I did see one. So because I didn't see a black panther either, or a mountain lion, but I didn't really expect to. But you never know. They are there. Just literally a handful of them are left. But the Florida panther is the same as the mountain lion, and it is there, but we didn't see any.
And I don't know how much preparation you'd done ahead of time. Were there things that you had read up on, and then you went there and found that there were even better things there that weren't in the guidebooks?
No, I really didn't look into it too much in advance. Well, I was on their website, and I kind of had an idea of what kind of animals we might see. I wanted to see a rattlesnake. I really wanted to see that, but I didn't want to see it with my foot, right above it, which worked out well because I did see one, and it was in the street. It didn't get squished, and it was probably 4 feet long. That was the ideal scenario, and our prof was there, so he confirmed, yeah, that's a rattler. Oh, cool. That was awesome, and nothing specific.
Anything else stand out for this trip?
It was just phenomenal too. Well, the camping was interesting. The site we were supposed to be on, I think due to renovations, they had to move us to a different place. But I walked through there every morning, and one morning I saw an alligator walk like right across what would have been where we were, and I was a little, that was a little unnerving. Like, okay, I don't know if I could have taken that, but and I do have to say that since the hurricane season with Rita and Katrina, a lot of damage was done in the park. Mm-hmm. And at this point in time, from what I've read up on, just to follow up on, there is some camping in Flamingo. There used to be a hotel there, a very dated hotel that you could stay at least be indoors at night and have showers and hot water and electricity. But that's not the case right now. That is closed. So the only way you can stay in the park, if that's of interest, is to camp. And people day trip in too from Miami or Homestead or whatever. Mm-hmm. So camping is the only way to actually stay in the park. And then if you're doing that, you have to be fairly well self-contained, because there is a little store that's open till 5, I think, a little corner store kind of thing. But, there's really there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. So you have to be prepared for that. But I would definitely do it. And getting up in the morning and walking along, watching the sunrise over Florida Bay was spectacular. That was one of my favorite pastimes.
Now that you have your notes in front of you, are the things that you wanted to add to some of the questions I'd asked earlier?
Well, let's do the gator versus the croc thing. Let's cover that, how you could tell the difference. You asked that, didn't you?
Let's see, it's the teeth and how skinny the snout is.
That's right. Those are important keys. Yep, the fourth tooth on the bottom of the croc, if you stop to count and you get that close, the fourth tooth sticks up into a notch in the top lip, or whatever you want to call it. The croc's a lighter color, more of a green, an olive green, whereas the gator is a dark, almost black color. And the gators are more likely to be in fresh to brackish water, and the crocodiles in brackish to salt water. So that also might be relevant, but, odds are if you're that close, it doesn't matter. You're just too close.
Although, in general, my understanding is they're both an ambush predator, and if they can tell that you can see them, they're less likely to attack.
That's probably very true. And I think our impression of, especially you hear the word croc, and you think the big saltwater crocs in Australia, and this is not quite the same thing. Mm-hmm. Those are very aggressive animals. And these I don't think are anywhere near that aggressive. I think they're much more placid, which, doesn't mean if you didn't go barging into the water, splashing all over the place, that you might not meet one. But generally speaking, I don't think that you'd be in danger. Anything
else we should know before we go to the Everglades?
Bring mosquito repellent. That's a big one. Lots of it with DEET. And there are some fantastic trails, even if you don't want to camp, which I can understand. And there weren't hot showers either, by the way, but that water wasn't cold. It was tepid, so it was survivable. But anyway, there are great visitor centers and great trails that you could walk on that show you a lot of swamp life from a boardwalk, and you can go out and you get to see from there. You wouldn't see crocs, but you would see alligators and hundreds of different birds and birds stalking prey and turtles and all sorts of stuff. So you don't by any means have to be ready to rough it for a week. You could go down for a day and go to the Anhinga Trail, which is fantastic. There are a couple other trails, but that's probably the most common one. And they have a great visitor center, lots of information, great ranger tours and walks, things like that.
And what stands out about that particular trail for you?
I missed it, but a day that we were there, but we weren't on that trail, an alligator and a ball python, a big ball python, tried to kill each other. And actually, I believe they succeeded in killing each other. The downside to the Everglades is people too stupid to own pets set their big snakes free there. And so there actually is a small, and hopefully not, but probably breeding population of pythons in the Everglades, which is, obviously they're not a native animal. The ecosystem is not set up for a big snake predator, but there are some there. And so when another class had seen it, and I heard about it, and the next day I looked everywhere for them, but I didn't see them. But the croc had the snake, but the snake was wrapped around the gator. And I believe nobody won that one. But I figured if there was going to be a showdown between two giant reptiles, I would at least like to see it, but I didn't. I was disappointed by that, but because I wouldn't expect to see pythons down there. And that's actually another thing that people have intentionally set way too many things like that free down there. But in addition, because it's a hurricane zone, there are warehouses in Miami that house, I don't know, animals coming in for whatever reason that have been destroyed. So my prof said he wasn't all surprised one year when he said he saw monkeys down there in the jungle.
Oh,
so that can happen. And so who really knows what's running around loose down there? But so, there's some surprising critters, I guess.
any final thoughts on the Everglades?
I can't wait to get back there, and I highly recommend that people get down there, take a day off from seeing Disney and all of the other things, and see the real Florida and what most of Florida really was like, and check out the Everglades, because it's fantastic.
Well, thanks so much, Heidi, for being with us and for sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
To tell your heron from your ibis, Heidi also recommended the National Audubon Society Field Guide for Florida, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com if you're interested. The first internet resource I have for you today is something to accompany the recent episodes on Turkey, especially Istanbul, and also the new video episode that came out. And that's a series of 12 lectures done by Lars Brownworth on the 12 Byzantine rulers, which will cover Byzantine history. So check that out. Links to that in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. And if you haven't seen the latest video episode 14 on Istanbul, on the church St. Saviour and Cora, check that out. I think you might be interested. This one is a little different as it has some narration, which is the first for the video episodes. And speaking of video, you might also be interested to know that Lonely Planet has a new video section on their website at lonelyplanet.tv, which has user-submitted videos. So if you want to make your home movies from your vacation famous, that'd be a good place to do it. lonelyplanet.tv. I had a letter from Anne, who was on the show last year talking about Turkey, that pointed out that when I was in Istanbul, I missed the archaeological museum. And so she gave me a link to some of the exhibits there, and I'll put that in the show notes. I also got an email from Monique, and Monique says, just dropping a line to say hello. I'm a new listener. I found your podcast while looking for travel podcasts, and I think yours is the best I've heard. Well, thanks, Monique. I'm a photographer, so I'm constantly moving around, and of course my passport is barely intact. I just got back from Israel, Egypt, and Sudan trek, and I'm about to go off to India and Bhutan. My mother calls me a kamikaze traveler for my habit of getting a job and running off without planning. The best moment, though, was being dead broke in Sudan, where there weren't any ATMs or basically anywhere to get dollars. Though I do have to mention that your podcast is the perfect thing for when I have to stay in New York for long periods of time, and I begin to long for airplane food and not hearing English. Anyway, best of luck and keep up the good work. Thanks very much for your letter, Monique. If you want your email read on the show, the easiest way would be to call my comment line, which is 206-MOM-LOVE, 206-MOM-LOVE, and leave a voice comment, or send me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. Even better, if you want to share it with the whole community, go and post on the discussion boards, amateurtraveler.com/board, or leave a comment on the website. Also check out the new articles that are showing up on the website. There's one this week about European travels, staying in small hotels. There's also another article about my favorite beach in the world, and if you want to know what that is, amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
The best and the brightest, served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Podshow and Limelight.